Friday. We're going to get this hearing moving. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Representative Artro.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today we have quite a few of members online. For those members, you know the drill. If you'd like to be heard on a question, please just raise your hand. Otherwise, keep yourselves muted. Let us know if there is technical difficulties. You could text me or text somebody that is here. If we can start by introducing just the members that are here. Representative Rowe, if you'd like to start off, and then we'll go right down the line with Representative Ledbetter and go forward. I just figured you were sitting there.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative David Rowe, I come from the 85th Legislative District. That's all of Snyder County and parts of Union, Juniata, and Mifflin counties.
Good morning, everyone. Representative Robert Ledbetter, representing the 109th District, all of Columbia County.
Good morning, Representative Dane Watcher, 116th District. That's the lower part of Luzerne County and northern part of Schuylkill County.
Good morning, everybody. Torrin Ecker. I represent parts of Adams and Cumberland County from the south central part of the state.
Josh Kale, I represent Beaver and Washington County.
Mike Cabell, 117th District, Luzerne County, including beautiful Lehman Township in the Back Mountain.
Jamie Flick, I represent parts of Lycoming County and parts of Union County. Thank you.
Good morning, friends. State Rep Jonathan Fritz, proudly representing the 111th Legislative District comprising Wayne and Susquehanna counties.
All right, and online we have Representative Struzzi, Representative James, Representative Nelson, and Representative Rigby. Before I give brief opening remarks and introduce our testifiers, I would like to say thank you to Representative Cabell for having us here in his district, for showing in the leadership that you've shown already in your first couple of months in office. And if you'd like to say a couple of opening remarks, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I just want to thank you, Chairman Kale, your unbelievably amazing staff for everything you've done. This is quite a lift here, building all the infrastructure for these hearings. So thank you to you and your staff and Vice Chair Ecker for being here. Thank you to all the members that showed up. We are really quite a team here in the Northeast and beyond. So I just want to thank all the members that traveled such distances to be here today. Thank you to the Back Mountain EMS and staff, Brenda and Alan Pugh, for setting up this room for us and all they do for the community. I will be incredibly brief because nobody is here to listen to me. They're here to listen to our incredible panel. But this is an incredibly important topic. We were just in a beautiful area, not too far north of here, where it's Saudi Arabia of natural gas under our feet, and really this area and beyond is going to play a really pivotal role in reliability in the grid. I know that's going to be the theme of our hearing today, is reliability and infrastructure. So I just want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you, Chairman Kale.
Thank you, Representative. And we are also happy to have co-hosting this, Representative Fritz. If you'd like to say a few words out of the gates here.
Cool. Thank you, Chairman Kale, bringing in the team, hosting us here today as well. Mike Cabell, having us here in your district. Mike, thank you very, very much. Who's also, I want to mention this, a highly valuable freshman legislator, and proving your worth, buddy. Job well done. So our electrical grid and electricity delivery system truly is an engineering marvel. Now, some of our neighbors in society, they just believe that our lights or our electric baseboard heater just comes on by magic. Well, the truth is, there's a source and there's a delivery system in place, and that backbone is integral. And as we experience increased electrification, what needs to be focused on? And there are certain realities to this electricity delivery. We need on-demand, on-the-ready, base load type energy. And right now, friends, that's natural gas, that's nuclear, that's coal. Now, at some point in the future, hopefully the near future, we can add hydrogen to that list. But I think that today's information, we're going to be able to really drill in and impart the fact that we have specific needs. We need to focus. And friends, we need to be realistic. There is a place in our portfolio for renewable energies, but we need to focus on on-demand, reliable, baseload energy provisions. Chairman Kale, thank you very much. Looking forward to today's hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. And also joining us online is Representative Marla Brown. So this topic, coming from southwestern Pennsylvania, energy in my district is truly is king. In the northern part of my district, I have a nuclear plant all over my district. I have natural gas extraction. The southern part of my district, we have coal. We have solar fields that are going up in my district. I think the largest one west of Harrisburg is actually in Robinson Township. In my district. So energy is what puts food on the table for many, many of my constituents. This issue is something that is very critical to me and something that has become concerning, and I think it should concern all of us. And it's going to be a topic of this conversation here today, is this energy policy that we have seen coming from the left saying that we want to limit our ability to generate energy by going into programs, having energy taxes on fossil fuels, while at the same time, we want more things to be plugged in. So we want electric cars. We want electric stoves. We don't want to use natural gas. We don't want to use oil and gas. And quite frankly, the whole philosophy of plugging more things in, I'm good with, because at the end of the day, that's Pennsylvania extracted energy fueling our cars. It's Pennsylvania extracted energy keeping our lights on. That's our coal. That's our natural gas. That's our nuclear facilities. What the concern is our ability or inability to produce that energy. And with the plants that are shutting down across this Commonwealth because of this energy tax that the last administration put us into, and the current administration, I'm not sure what they're going to end up doing with it, but it sure looks like right now that they're keeping us in it, what that's going to do for our grid reliability. And that's what we're here to learn more about. And today we have two sets of testifiers. Our first set, we'll hear from PJM, and it's just you up there, Stephen, so you got the whole floor to yourself. And if you'd like to get started here, and we can, if we could have 5-10 minutes testimony, then we'll do some Q&A or whatever you'd like as far as the length of testimony. If you'd like to go shorter, rather, that's fine as well. And thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Thank you, Chairman. It sounds like the mic's working, so thank you. So, well, good morning, Chairman Kale, Vice Chair Ecker, members of the House Republican Policy Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Stephen Bennett, and I am a policy manager for PJM. I'd also just like to say thank you to Representative Cavell and the people here. I had a need for a meeting room this morning, and they very graciously were able to set that up for me, so thank you very much for that. PJM Interconnection is an RTO, a regional transmission organization. Our focus is the reliable operation of the electric grid. We serve 65 million people across our footprint, which is some are part or all of 13 states in the District of Columbia, and that includes all of Pennsylvania. Ensuring a safe and reliable bulk power system, keeping the lights on, that is our primary mission. This requires constant system monitoring by skilled operators and real-time coordination with our members. PJM also strives to utilize its scale and competitive processes to keep costs low for consumers. Reliability and affordability are cornerstones of everything that PJM does. My testimony today, filed with you, which I won't thankfully read verbatim, really focuses on a couple things. A little bit of an overview of what PJM is, what we do, as well as our perspectives on reliability and resilience of the grid, and a couple key points. So summarizing those points, the U.S. electric grid, so not just the PJM grid, but the U.S. electric grid is experiencing an accelerating transition towards the use of intermittent renewable resources. If you look at the resources that want to connect to the PJM grid today, right now, the preponderance, the vast majority of them are renewable. So what we're seeing is a very balanced fuel fleet now, but what we're seeing coming onto the grid is 97% renewable. PJM has sufficient generation to meet the needs of our system today, However, as we look further out, we are concerned by some of the trends that we see. Industry and policymakers can take steps now to help de-risk the transition and maintain reliability, and PJM embraces its role to help facilitate the industry transition while using our competitive markets to maintain efficiencies. PJM is an independent, revenue-neutral, and fuel-neutral carrying out our reliability functions. We value resources using different fuel types based on their reliability contribution and cost effectiveness. The scale of the PJM system provides tremendous value for grid reliability. PJM has a diverse portfolio of resources and a footprint that spans multiple states and multiple time zones. Operating our region as one cohesive system affords us the flexibility to rely on these resources across different locations and allows us to better absorb disturbances to the system. Further, using our competitive processes for the construction of transmission and generation resources, PJM is able to derive significant cost savings for our customers. All in all, through the use of our regional scale and competition, PJM is able to save consumers approximately $3 to $4 billion a year. PJM's competitive wholesale markets provide a powerful tool to support reliability by providing financial incentives and encouraging competition to provide electricity where and when it's needed. The markets serve to attract investment in new generation and technology at the lowest cost. Our Regional Transmission Expansion Plan, or RTEP, identifies needs for grid expansion and development up to 15 years into the future. Operationally, these systems enhancements reduce the frequency of emergency procedures, increase operating margins, and improve the ability to import or export power with our neighbors. The PJM markets have opened up opportunities for the export of electricity from resource-rich states like Pennsylvania to net-consuming states. This results in economic development and consumer cost savings on both sides of that transaction. The market has also allowed for the development of innovative and promising new technologies being deployed in our footprint, ranging from batteries to smart wires technologies to opportunities for customers to receive the value of the solar panels that they put on their roofs. Competitive markets are a proven tool that can deliver a more efficient energy transition. The current PJM fuel mix is balanced and diverse between different fuel types, and we have adequate generation resources to serve the anticipated needs of our system today. Indeed, NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, in its recent summer assessment, picked out PJM as one of the regions that is not anticipated to have issues during this upcoming summer. However, as we look further out, maintaining that adequate level of generation with the right operational and physical characteristics will be essential for us to continue to maintain a stable and reliable grid. There are four things that we see about maintaining these generation resources with the necessary attributes over time. One, the rate of electricity demand is likely to continue to increase from electrification, so electric cars, electric buildings, and increasing deployment of high-demand data centers in the region. We're seeing a lot of intense data center development in the PJM footprint. Ohio, Virginia, and rapidly joining that fray is Pennsylvania. Dispatchable generators are retiring at a rapid, date-certain pace, largely due to government and private sector policies. And there are some aspects of PJM's markets that are sending retirement signals, but right now what we're seeing is a lot of policies that are driving either comply or retire mandates. And the PJM market signals can't overcome laws that say you must either comply or retire. Or in many cases, it's very difficult to send a sufficient price signal to overcome those comply or retire mandates. Three, replacement generation is primarily intermittent and limited duration storage resources. What that means is it requires multiple megawatts of those resources to replace 1 megawatt of the dispatchable resources we're seeing come off the grid. Retirements are becoming, the risk of retirements outpacing the construction of new resources due to the combination of industry forces, including siting, supply chain, and those impacts are not fully known yet. So there are a couple of areas of action for PJM and for policymakers alike. PJM is working on our policies to make sure that we can get generation on the grid faster. We're looking at our markets to make sure they're sending the right signals to incentivize new generation and to keep the generation we need. And we're working with FERC on gas-electric coordination. We need the gas system to feed the natural gas generation on demand all the time whenever we need it, whether it's hot, cold, or in between. And there are areas for policymakers as well. We can't do this on our own. So a couple of things I would ask any policymaker, state, local, federal. Please consider taking some actions to alleviate supply chain issues where you can. Please try to take into consideration reliability. When you're looking at energy policy, environmental policy is important, but reliability policy is just as important. We can do the transition reliably, but that has to be a deliberate policy decision. And please consider balancing permitting reform that allows for the efficient build-out of infrastructure, pipelines, especially if we're going to start talking about carbon capture and hydrogen. That's going to need infrastructure to actually be commercially viable. The electric grid is one of our most important infrastructure assets. It is critical to the economy, health, and security of all Americans. We need to give protection and enhancement of the grid the same level of focus that we give to our equally important environmental goals. Policies need to continually be crafted in a manner that ensure that the reliability and affordability of the grid can be maintained and enhanced as we transition to a cleaner and greener generation fleet. I thank you for the opportunity to present my testimony today. I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. And also with us here today online is Representative Gatos. She has come on since. I just have a very brief question, and I'm going to hand it over to the Representative Cabela. You had mentioned policies of policymakers shutting down essentially generation in the Commonwealth, or more broadly than that. Could you get specific in Pennsylvania as far as what policies that you're seeing that could potentially be shutting down generation here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, and actually right now, Pennsylvania is not one of the states that has a lot of active policies that have a comply or retire mandate. We're seeing that in some other states in the PJM footprint as well as nationwide. And the idea is they set an emissions goal or they set a date and they say you must meet this emissions goal or you must use an alternative fuel by this date. And if you don't, then your only option is to come off of the grid. We understand the policy imperative, and we understand that states have the ability and absolutely the right to determine their resources inside the state. But the issue is that, again, our price signals can't make a change to that if it turns out that the technologies necessary to backfill those resources aren't available at the time of the comply or retire date. And that's where we're starting to see in the future some challenges around that balance sheet of, do we have the right units on the grid? And as some of them are coming off, do we have the right units coming on to replace them?
Within PJM, who does? Who has that type of policy? What state? I'm trying to understand.
There's a bill in Illinois called the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, and that's a component of that. There's some additional states to the east of us that either have or are contemplating similar legislation.
So when that happens and a state can't generate electricity, how does the system compensate?
Well, we don't know exactly yet because most of these retirement dates are in the future. Now, I will say that CEJA is the acronym that they use for that bill. They do have some reliability safety valve language. And so what they say is if they get to the comply or retire date and there are concerns about reliability, that some of those units can continue to generate. And we're very thankful that those safety valves are in place for CEJA. And you can talk to maybe some of the generator owners about some of the uncertainty that creates. But again, the idea is if you're going to pass legislation that could impact reliability, it is very important to have a consideration of reliability and effective measures to deal with continuing reliability once those dates kind of come to pass.
So is that discretionary? Based off of looking at the state government can determine whether or not they can go forward, they offer an extension, or is there some sort of metric that's used to determine reliability?
It's a little ambiguous, but the idea is they create a working group that would include PJM, and they're also a part of MISO, which is the Midwest version of PJM. So it would be a broad working group, including us, to make those decisions. How the decision on reliability is made itself is not fully baked within the legislation itself.
It's just remarkable. You got people looking to invest billions of dollars or not investing billions of dollars, and they got to bank on some ambiguous, using your words, forecast from a group of people that, it's just, it's incredible. All right, Representative Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bennett, we had a discussion before the hearing started. I wish the cameras were rolling for that, but I'm going to bring it up again. We talked a little bit about, I mentioned that folks, the increasing prevalence of Teslas, electrified vehicles. You alluded to the fact of just increasing electrification of our society is going to be something we need to plan for. And going back to policy, versus reality, we have some misguided policy in Pennsylvania, RGGI, which will be an energy tax on our citizens. Let's go back to the policy versus reality of what is needed to plan for grid expansion, development, and solve for reliability and diversification. We talked a little bit about how that's what's most important. Policy is important, but in reality, we have to plan for make sure we have reliable energy. Because in California, there's times where they ask you not to charge your vehicles and turn your air conditioning on, and usually those are the times that we want our air conditioning on. We have to charge our vehicles. So could you speak on that a little bit, please?
Yes, thank you. So I guess what I would say is, for a long time, PJM's job is to understand the future needs of electricity. What are our customers going to need? And what we're seeing now, as I indicated, is an increase in electrification, and that is in buildings with electrified appliances, electrified heating. We're seeing it in the transportation sector. So it's in the light-duty vehicles, so the Teslas and the other light-duty vehicles, but we're also seeing electrification in larger, heavier vehicles and at ports and things of that nature. So we are, and when you add to that the data center development, some of the, there's some chip factory development because of federal policy as well. We are seeing increasing electrification, and in some cases, we're seeing increasing electrification in areas that are critical to human health and safety. And so for PJM, we've been, our part of our job is to track that, to understand the implication, to understand how that's going to impact the grid. And what we want to do is make sure that we have the right mix of generation assets, we have the right essential reliability services available to make sure that we can address the increasing load, that we stay reliable, that whether it's hot or cold or in between, the lights stay on and the heat stays on, and you can charge your car to get where you need to go to make a living and other things all the time. And so right now, our concern is that we want to make sure that we don't lose too many of those resources that have the on-demand reliability and flexibility, that have the essential reliability resources. We can't lose those before they're adequately replaced.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, piggybacking on what Chairman Kale said earlier, Pennsylvania should be one of the leaders, if not the leader, in energy in the country and the world. So, whatever we could do as policymakers, as lawmakers, to continue to push that, we need to do. And that's what's so encouraging of having all my colleagues here today on such an important thing. We really need to focus on balancing policy, environmental stuff, which we all want. A beautiful country, beautiful. Pennsylvania is beautiful. That's why I live here. We want to keep that, but I want to be able to turn my air conditioning on at 5 p.m. if I need to. So thank you.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bennett, thank you for your testimony today. So I'm going to share with you a meeting that we had a couple of months ago. It was myself and a couple of House colleagues and a couple of PA Senate colleagues. We actually sat down with German energy government officials. And Germany started their shift or their transition, and it's been an ambitious transition towards exclusively renewables really in the early 2000s. And they're realizing now that they're 15, 20 years into this transition that they need more baseload energy, they need more on-demand energy. And I'll even back that up a step. They've actually just decommissioned, Germany just decommissioned their last 3 nuclear plants. Okay, over fear of radiation and where to store their spent rods. So they have totally moved away from nuclear in this move towards renewables, and they realize, oh my goodness, we need more on-demand energy. I need more baseload energy. So they are now searching the globe looking for the cleanest fuel source out there. And you want to know where they found it? They found it in Pennsylvania, right underfoot. The cleanest fuel source is Pennsylvania-sourced natural gas. And I'm not just saying that. You can fact check me. It's quantifiable. I'm sharing that story because I think that there's a little bit of a crystal ball effect or foreboding occurring there. Mr. Bennett, if we continue on this transition, because you articulated that in your testimony, that we're seeing accelerating demand, but at the same time, an increased amount of renewable energy going into the grid system, what we're seeing in Germany, is that a foreboding of what we're heading towards here in Pennsylvania and in your region that you see with the PJM?
It's an excellent question, and I am somewhat familiar with the Germany situation. I don't know that I can say with any certainty that we're heading towards the same outcome that Germany is seeing. There's a lot of differences with where we are in PJM and the differences between the United States and Europe. What I can say again is that what we're seeing now, and the reason we're raising some of these issues and doing these studies and releasing white papers is that we're seeing concerns in the future. And those concerns can be ameliorated if we address them now. Right? So again, right now, today, PJM is in a very good spot. Pennsylvania is in an excellent spot. We have the right mixture of resources. We have the essential reliability services that we need. We actually have robust reserves. And so right now, things look very good. What we're concerned about is if policies and economics drive the retirement of these resources too fast, that could be a problem. Not certainly a problem, but could be a problem. And I want to be very clear, renewables have a place on the PJM grid. The transition is real. Again, you just need to look at our queue. You just need to look at where private equity money is going. You just need to look at where pension money is going. Renewables have an important place in the PJM system. But until the technologies are developed to fully replace all the things we need for reliability, we need to maintain that diverse fleet of generation for the foreseeable future.
Thank you very much.
Representative Rowe.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. First, I just want to clarify some of the talking points of clean energy versus green energy, because I think that tends to become a talking point, right? Saying that clean energy versus the alternative of dirty energy, right? Inferring that things like solar or wind are just these limitless resources that, there's never any fallout for, right? But you still have to, though the sun may be a limitless source of energy, the panels still have to be decommissioned. They have to be disposed of somewhere. Windmill turbines got to go somewhere. Maybe it's in landfills, right? So there's always this alternative cost, even to these, quote, green energy items. So the question that I'm looking at is talking about the standards of production overseas versus, in like the PJM grid area, where, we see in Pennsylvania, the coal that we burn, the natural gas that we use, as Representative Fritz mentioned, it is clean, right? I mean, it's the cleanest standard that you can find. Whereas if you go to China, where they're importing billions of dollars worth of coal, they're not burning it the same way that we are. So when we're talking about truly clean energy, producing it in the United States, where we are able to produce it clean, produce it better, you look at the Paris Climate Accord standards, where the largest offenders are countries like China, who are doing nothing about emission standards, pollution, carbon capture. They're not doing any of that. Meanwhile, we are, right? So could you speak to the differentiation between production standards internationally versus what we do here, and why we should be trying to produce more energy here and producing it right, producing it clean, rather than outsourcing energy to productions to countries that are doing it wrong?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I understand the concept and the concern. I must say, it's not actually an area of expertise for me. I probably can't speak in a fully educated manner about the differences in the production. From PJM's perspective, again, for us, we understand the importance of environmental policy. We support environmental policy and the transition. We do, support the idea of domestic energy production, because that means that we'll have the fuel and the generation sources that we need here. We do support the idea of infrastructure development here in the United States, because it's important that we have, our transmission owners and our generation owners have access to all the things they need to keep the grid reliable. But I just apologize. I'm probably not the right person to speak to the differences in production standards.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, your testimony today has been invaluable, and I just think it's important for observers to realize that the energy that we create here in Pennsylvania, it is clean energy, right? I mean, the energy we create, regardless, all of the above. If you want solar, wind, gas, coal, I'm fine with all of it. All above energy portfolio is what we should be pursuing. But the misnomer that somehow, we have dirty energy versus clean energy. In the United States, the energy we make is clean energy, and it's not us that's the main pollutant sources are coming from. It's the overseas producers that somehow seem to get a pass in the eyes of the global, progressive green community. So thank you very much.
Mr. Brand, when you say you support the transition, what does the transition mean? Help me understand exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah, so when we say transition, and again, I have a friend in the industry that actually prefers the idea of, or the term expansion, because, if we're going to expand load, we're going to need more energy to be able to serve that load. But generally, the industry has talked about this idea of a transition where more and more of the generation that we use for grid reliability is renewable. It's intermittent, it's solar, it's wind, things of that nature. And so it's kind of an industry term of art, I would say.
Is there any utility to using renewables? Is there any practical advantage to using renewables?
Yeah, I mean, well, so I don't know that there's any utility in the United States that is 100% renewable right now, but almost all utilities.
I'm sorry, that was I used the wrong word when I said utility. I guess my question is, if we're looking strictly at generation and we're looking strictly at your ability to create electricity, if that was your only consideration, would there be any reason whatsoever to use a solar panel over natural gas or coal or nuclear?
I mean, yes. So it's a nuanced answer. We don't really look at it as a comparison of one is better than the other. We actually look at it as all of them have a role to play in a diverse fleet of generation resources. Every generation resource has benefits and challenges. If you think about coal has on-site fuel. So coal has fuel right there on site. They're not worried about delivered fuel. They're not worried about intermittency because of weather. But coal has emissions. Coal has, a coal pile can freeze. So it's not perfect. It's not bad. But it's not a perfect resource. Nuclear has on-site fuel as well, but it's not flexible. Nuclear tends to generate at a certain level, but it can't ramp up and down to meet kind of the vagaries of the daily, hourly load shapes that we see. Natural gas is very flexible. Natural gas is clean and efficient because a lot of the natural gas resources that have been built recently, but it's delivered fuel. So if there's a problem in the fuel delivery system, frozen wellheads or issues with the pipeline system, they may not be available to us. Wind and solar are weather dependent, but they have zero fuel costs. They have very few emissions when they're running, if any, and actually none. They can be located on site, so you can have things located very close to the load center. You can put solar panels on the roof of a large factory. So they all have benefits. They all have challenges. They all have a place in the PJM grid for reliability. But what we need to do is we need to make sure we have the right balance. Again, we need those essential reliability services. We need to make sure that we can call on units at all times of the day and night and under all weather conditions.
If there was no taxpayer subsidies or mandates from policymakers regarding renewables, would there be any renewables on the grid?
I don't know. I'm not an economist. I don't know how dependent all renewables are on subsidies or extra market payments. I think that probably we would have some. If you look at the buying preferences of some of the largest companies in the United States, if you look at the buying preferences of Google and Apple and Amazon and some of those other corporations, they're driving some of the renewable development as much as the subsidies are. So we probably would, but probably not nearly as much.
Representative Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to kind of piggyback on this a little bit here. And looking at your testimony, one of the pillars you talk about is retirement of old retirements of the pace of retirement of some of the energy is being driven by state and environmental initiatives, and that's quickly outpacing technology catching up on the renewable side. I'm wondering, just kind of getting into that, talking a little bit more about that are things like RGGI and what we've been calling the energy taxes, which are targeted at carbon, coal, and natural gas. That seems to me that's going to expedite that even more. How far behind? One, can renewables ever get to that level? And two, how far behind are we for renewables to get to the level that would need to keep up with this accelerated retirement of carbon fuel?
I do wish that I had a crystal ball on the trajectory of renewables, because if I did, then I would be massively rich in the stock market. But I think that, and I'm sorry, but the idea is that we do need that technology to advance to that point. But we can't say when it's going to happen or what is going to be the technology breakthrough that creates commercial viability for the long-term storage resources that we need. We are seeing rapid technology advances in battery storage. We're seeing rapid technology advances across the renewable generation industry, but they're not there yet. We do need them to get there. And for us, we're hopeful that we'll get there. But because our focus is on reliability now and into the future, we can't only be hopeful that they will get there. We need to make sure that we have the reliability services that we need now and until that technology breakthrough, when and if that technology breakthrough occurs.
So, and again, I'm not pinning down on exact timelines. Are we 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I mean, what's realistically? Because look, I mean, I'll be honest with you. If we implement something like RGGI and it truly gets implemented, you're going to, if we're 10 years away from something, the grid is just going to be shocked, by something like that, a policy like that, that's going to try to shift things to renewables and the technology's not there. So is this a decade away? What's realistically from your, and I'm not holding you to it, I'm just kind of curious as somebody who's in the industry.
Yeah, I understand. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't. It's not an area we do follow innovation, and we have a group that follows innovation. I don't know that we'd be comfortable making those kind of predictions. So I apologize.
And perhaps this highlights the issue, right? Is that, the fact that we don't definitively know when renewables are going to catch up to, carbon type, natural gas, coal. We know the type of energy that produces. We have confidence in its ability to provide baseload energy. I think it just highlights again the fact that accelerating us towards more renewables causes huge grid unreliability, and perhaps it's time to put the brakes on those types of policies. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just touching briefly back on, you mentioned the term expansion versus transition. I think that's really important to keep in mind, piggybacking on what Rep. Ecker just mentioned. If you transition too fast, and Rep. Fritz mentioned as well, Germany is a prime example of shutting down their nuclear facilities, which, by the way, that's insane. That's renewable and relatively a good source of energy. But all of a sudden they have to come back and fire up the coal factories, or the coal energy producing factories again. So that's a prime example of rushing this transition, and maybe we should stop talking about it as a transition, because in reality, to your point before, coal could freeze, pipelines you could have issues, you could have issues with nuclear, you could have issues with all of these different technologies. So rather than talking about expansion, I think it's important maybe for all of us to use, unfortunately in our world, terminology matters, perception is reality. So maybe we should start talking about this as an expansion, and like we said, a diversification. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I guess it's more of a statement, but if you have any points on that, I think it's a really important thing to talk about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And energy policy is charged because it impacts so much of our daily lives, and it intersects with environmental policy. So I agree with you. Words matter. The way we approach these things matter. From a PJM perspective, again, there are industry terms of art that we use. Sometimes we use them just because that's kind of the industry term. So for the transition versus the expansion, or how we talk about it, I agree it does matter. But for us, again, it's about balance. We just need to make sure that as more and more people electrify the things that are required for their health and safety, that we have the tools necessary to make sure that the grid remains stable and reliable.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Anyone online? Oh, we have Representative Twardzik online as well now. Mr. Bennett, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming here and testifying. I'm looking forward to learning more about PJM in general. It's something that is fascinating. It's a real asset for Pennsylvania, too. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. And you're all invited to visit. So we do PJM visits where we can show you the control room bunker. You can go down into the mezzanine area, see. It's kind of like a mini NASA where we're running the grid across. So you're all welcome, and we'd love to have you.
I've been told it's fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Delaware County, right? Montgomery. Sorry. Next panel that we have. Let me get back on track here. Next panel that we have, Mr. Glenn Thomas, the president of GT Power Group. We have Rob Baer, the president of the Pennsylvania Building Construction Trades Council, and George Stark, director of external affairs for Katerra Energy. This is our panel on grid sustainability. Gentlemen, Mr. Thomas, if you'd like to, or actually, Mr. Stark, if you'd like to,
I'm on cleanup, sir.
Okay, you're on cleanup. Go that way, or Mr. Thomas, Mr. Baer, Mr. Stark. If you keep it 3 to 5 minutes, then we'll open it up for questions.
All right. Well,
That's
Stephen
mainly
didn't take
Jo-
his
that's
full
mainly
amount of
for
time.
George. yield your time to Mr. Thomas. There you go.
Okay,
All right.
and I'm
Yeah.
going to steal some of Stephen's time that he left on the
Perfect.
clock. So.
All right, Mr. Thomas, you're up.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, for the opportunity to be here. It's great to be in Luzerne County. Just a quick personal note on my background. I actually got my second professional paycheck from the House Republican legal staff, so it's great to be back with some of the group I started with. Yeah, that's right. I don't know if you guys remember Joe Murphy and Ed Hussey. Those were my first bosses in state government. So I then went on to be 6.5 years as Governor Tom Ridge's Energy and Environmental Policy Advisor, then spent 4 years on the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. Left the Public Utility Commission in 2005 and was with a law firm for 2 years and then opened up a consulting business focusing on PJM issues. I run an organization called the PJM Power Providers Group. P3, as we like to call ourselves, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to properly designed and well-functioning markets in the PJM footprint. Combined, our members own almost 90,000 megawatts of generation, so we largely represent the merchant generators in the footprint. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to give you a 2.5-minute history lesson in Pennsylvania because I think it's important to understand how we got to where we are, and then I'll get into some of the issues we're facing today. So if I could go to the next slide. In 1996, Pennsylvania restructured its electricity industry. Prior to 1996, Pennsylvania had what was known as a vertically integrated model. Generation, transmission, distribution, all were owned by the same company. It was your utility company, whether it was PPL, PECO, MedEd, Penelec, depending on what part of the state you're in. All three functions of the energy delivery system were owned and operated by the utility. The rates and terms and conditions of that service were set by the Public Utility Commission. This was a classic vertically integrated model. If we go to the next slide. In 1996, Pennsylvania made the move, to, like I said, to go to competition. This is one of the first things I worked with Governor Ridge to do. And basically what the restructuring of the industry did was move generation from being a utility service to being a competitive service. So you can now shop for your electricity provider. If you are building a new power plant, you are no longer getting guaranteed rate recovery for that power plant. Merchant capital is going to be required and necessary in order to build new generation facilities to serve Pennsylvania customers. This was the model we set up. We did this, if we go to the next slide, again, we're going to go very quickly through this. Happy to answer any questions. We did this because we thought there would be an opportunity to candidly lower costs for consumers. We saw opportunities to drive efficiencies in the system. We were competitive with other states at the time. This was an opportunity to make Pennsylvania more competitive by introducing the power of competitive markets to what had traditionally been a monopoly. Next slide. There were a lot of concerns at the time. I'm going to skip over these for now because I think probably the next slide is the one that's going to be most interesting to you all, and that is how has competition worked in Pennsylvania? Well, it's worked pretty well. Up until 3 years ago, we were really seeing robust reserve margins. The third bullet is probably the one that gets the most attention. Prior to restructuring, Pennsylvania's electricity rates were 15 to 20% above the national average. Now we're about the same below they were above the national average prior to 1996. Now they're 15 to 20% below the national average. So we've made tremendous progress in that regard, just in terms of lowering rates. And the other thing, too, that I think is just great is just the emissions from our power sector have really gone down. And that's been NOx, it's been SOx, it's been carbon. In fact, no state other than Ohio is the only other state that has reduced carbon emissions more than Pennsylvania since 2005 from the power sector. It's EIA data. It's out there. It's not well known for sure. And I rarely put Wikipedia in my presentations, but if you want to see a list of the power plants in Pennsylvania, go ahead and pull it up. Pennsylvania is a net energy exporter. We have a lot of plants. We've seen a lot of investment, billions of dollars of investment in these facilities. Some of the most state-of-the-art plants on the planet are being built actually in this area of the state right here because of the Competition Act and because of what we've been able to do with Pennsylvania innovation. Next slide. Now, I want to tie it back to PJM. Stephen gave you a great overview of what PJM is. Let's go to the next slide, if we can. Why is PJM critical to Pennsylvania's success? It's real simple. In order to have competitive retail markets working, you need to have competitive wholesale markets supporting them. In Pennswould when I was with the governor's office, when I was with the commission, and since then, Pennsylvania's been working very close with PJM to try to set up markets that would allow PJM, which is regulated by FERC, to support the policies of Pennsylvania. And we've largely had a really great history of that. Like I said, these wholesale policies have really driven competition, both in the energy market, and we'll talk about the capacity market a little bit, but the whole idea that we can introduce competition has been really fueled by the fact that PJM has been a successful partner in this. Next slide, please. But we're seeing some troubling trends, and Stephen touched on this, and this gets to Representative Cable's question about what we can do a little bit. But just at a high level, the challenges that we're seeing really are really pretty simple. I mean, this is a supply-demand situation. And what we're seeing is a situation where the demand is going to outpace the supply. We're seeing increasing demand. We're seeing shrinking supply. And the supply that's replacing what's retiring is not of the quality and quantity necessary to sustain reliability. It's that simple. These markets are incredibly complicated, but the problem we're facing is pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. Why is demand increasing? Again, pretty simple. Electric vehicles, electric buildings. Electric buildings are a big one, folks. The fact that a lot of states are moving towards policies that are going away from natural gas as a heating source and to electrification, more heat pumps on the system. Heat pumps are very efficient when the temperature is 40 to 50 degrees. They're very inefficient when it gets below freezing. That's creating a big demand on the system. The other thing I should mention from a demand perspective, and there's another important change that is happening because of these increases in demand. PJM is moving from a summer peaking system to a winter peaking system. That means our highest demand used to be at 4 or 5 o'clock on a summer afternoon. We're moving that now to 4 in the morning in January and February. And we'll get into the supply side of it. Think of what solar is doing at 4 or 5 in the morning in February. It's not that great. And we've also seen data centers in particular are really popping up, particularly in the Virginia area and Ohio. We're seeing crypto mining here in Pennsylvania, somewhere in your districts. et cetera. So why are baseload resources retiring? It's again pretty straightforward. The price signals aren't there. Right now, the price signal that these capacity markets, these PJM markets are producing is about $28 a day. That was the last auction. Just to put that in comparison, the cost of new entry, which is the hypothetical cost to build a new plant, would be around $290 a day. So right now, the market is sending a signal that these resources should retire in the face of us knowing that we're going to need more of these resources, and we're actually headed into potentially some pretty serious reliability challenges. We'll get into the federal and state policies in a minute, but this slide is critically important, the next one. Thanks for putting it up. I want to spend a little bit more time on this. The red pink line represents demand on the system. And as you can see, demand is steadily increasing. The dotted line is a high electrification scenario, which means if we electrify as we think we might, the demand's going to increase at a greater rate. So if you look at the blue line, that's thermal generation. And note that the chart is 140,000 megawatts. So up until 140,000 megawatts, the thermal generation, coal, nuclear, gas. You can see the renewable part expanding. The dark gray piece is demand response. And what demand response is basically, that's when PJM is asking you to get off the system. So as soon as you get into that dark gray area, we're in an area where there's not enough generation on the system to meet the needs, and we're basically calling for conservation efforts to get people off in order to keep the system balanced. And when you see the light gray area, that's when we're in shortage. That's when we're no longer reliable, and you can see starting in 27, 28, which is really not that far off in this world, we're into shortage situations. And I should mention this is the whole RTO. This is not just Pennsylvania. There's 12 other states in the District of Columbia that are going to be in the same situation. If we go to the next slide. Again, and Stephen mentioned this, in 2023, we're in pretty good shape. 23% reserve margin is where, is very reliable. But anytime you get below 16% is when you start getting worried as a system planner. And as you can see, starting in about the 26, 27 time frame, we go below 16% reserve margins. And it's really troubling when you see those 5% and 3% numbers. That's where California is, that's where Texas is. That's where we get very, very worried about our ability to sustain our grid at those levels. So, like I said, anytime you see a number below 16, you get a little worried. Let's go on to the next slide. So now this is kind of interesting if you want to compare Stephen's slides with my slides. My slides are the 2021 version. The PJM has since updated these, but you can see the comparisons that are going on between these slides. But just as a general takeaway, I'd mention on this, this is a pretty diverse grid, as was mentioned. You got a nice mix of gas, coal, nuclear, renewables are coming on, what have you. If you boil this down to a Pennsylvania-specific list on the next list, you can see how Pennsylvania is doing. Let me make sure I'm making the right slides. Yeah, I am. The Pennsylvania queue, the Pennsylvania, again, very similar to the PJM mix. These numbers go up. The natural gas numbers go up a little. When you look at Stephen's slide, it's on 2022. The coal number goes down. The nuclear number is pretty consistent. Solar moves from, I think, 37 to, I think it was 80 in that slide. So, I mean, there are some changes year to year, but the trend is definitely, natural gas probably peaking, coal reducing, nuclear staying fairly consistent, and some increases in renewables. If we could let's skip ahead to slide 17, please. All right, so how did we get here? So why are we in a spot where we're looking at shortages on the horizon, yet the market signals are giving a message that resources should retire, and more importantly, resources should not enter the market? There's been a series of decisions that were made both by PJM and FERC that have really put us in this spot, that have led to historically low energy and historically low capacity prices that are levels that are not sufficient to sustain the investments that we're going to need it. I'd be happy to get any details. I'll just list them here on the next slide, on slide 18. This is where the markets get complicated and the rules get important. But let's just, here is a series of 6 decisions/events that had the net effect of, basically hurting the competitive market model. where, FERC has basically decided that, they're going to put their thumb on the scale for those efforts that are supporting efforts to subsidize resources from other states. Again, these are complicated issues here. I really don't have time to get into all of them. I'm happy to get into all of them if anybody would like to. But I think the bigger takeaway is, the federal government has made some decisions that have really hurt Pennsylvania's ability to pursue its policies. If we could skip ahead, I just want to talk about the state policies for a minute because you're asking about these, Representative Kale, and I think it's an important question. What are other states doing? Because we're in the same grid with all these other states. New Jersey, New Jersey has made the commitment to go 100%, and I put clean in quotes, by 2035. They're subsidizing 11,000 megawatts of offshore wind. They're subsidizing 2,000 megawatts of storage, 3,500 megawatts of solar. New Jersey used to be in a similar spot as Pennsylvania in terms of wanting to pursue a competitive market model. They've strayed mightily from that vision. They now basically believe on picking the resources and allowing the subsidized resources be the ones to meet the needs of consumers. Next slide. Maryland, very, very similar. Again, you have Governor Moore down there now. He's put out a 100% goal by 2035. They're subsidizing offshore wind. They're subsidizing solar. It's a very subsidy-driven state that you have in both Maryland and New Jersey. And then skipping to Illinois, the next one. And Illinois took this effort a step further, really. And Illinois is actually mandating the closure of certain gas facilities in the state. And in fact, by 2030, there's going to be 5,600 megawatts that has to close in 5,600 megawatts of some very new natural gas plants that have to close in Illinois, just as the grid is going short. So policies like this are not helping the reliability situation. All right, next slide. If we could end just quickly on a somewhat positive note. These are 2021 rates. 2022 is not out yet, but I think the important takeaway of this slide is Pennsylvania's electricity rates are very, very competitive with our neighboring states. These represent all in electricity costs, all the customer classes, all the utilities. This is a big old average. And as you can see, Pennsylvania's rates are very competitive with its neighbors, and it's very below the national average. So we have a good thing going here in Pennsylvania. We want that to continue, obviously, and slides like this are evidence of that. The next slide, and this was in PJM's materials as well, again, possibly undertold story here is just the tremendous reductions we've seen in NOx, SOx, and carbon in Pennsylvania. And this has been done without mandates, without picking and choosing, the resources that are going to be doing this. This is being driven by new efficient power plants replacing some of the older facilities. And George can probably talk more about that. But the environmental story is good in Pennsylvania. The reliability story has, it was good. It's concerning now, and certainly from a price standpoint, it's positive. So what will reverse the current trend? We need to see some rule changes at PJM and FERC. The current paradigm, the current PJM rules, the current FERC rules are going to continue to challenge Pennsylvania to meet its goals and stay on pace. We've already seen, the last few years what has happened. If you look at Stephen's slide, there's only 211 megawatts of new natural gas in Pennsylvania's queue. Yeah, you're shaking your head for good reason. I mean, it's just, there's a reason for that, and that is because the economic signals right now are not there for new natural gas. These need to change. PJM is working on it. They have a stakeholder process. Getting involved in that process is going to be important. And then finally, last slides, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues here. What can you all do as members of the General Assembly? Get educated on PJM issues, have hearings like this, visit PJM. It's well worth the visit. It's well worth the visit. Prioritize reliability, keep the conversation going, keep the pressure on PJM and FERC to do the right thing, to get back to some of these policies that will help put Pennsylvania where it has been historically and where it should be going forward. So with that said, I'll wrap up there and invite any questions. Sorry for going over. I apologize. I tried to go through a lot of material there.
You're fine. Mr. Bear?
So I'll keep mine short. My colleague spoke about the capacity payments, and you see in my testimony I was somewhat scathing to PJM, FERC, and NERC. One of the things we have to do is, he's right, we have to recorrect this. 3 years ago, we were getting, $8.2 billion in capacity payments. We're down to 2.2. It's making it impossible for our thermal generation to be competitive. the fines from the winter storm last year, $1.8 billion. So almost everything capacity payment paid back to our people, we paid out in fines. We're subsidizing heavily wind and solar, which gives them an advantage because they're getting their upfront construction cost, which lowers their cost to be able to bid into the grid markets at almost net zero. While my thermal generators, on the back end, yeah, the fuel's cheap up front. The cost of operating and maintaining those plants is incredible. So we got to level the playing field here. That's the bottom line. And as a building trades guy, part of this for me and all my members and economic growth in Pennsylvania, it's jobs. You know where we make good money? You know how we put Pennsylvanians back to work? The energy sector. That's where we've been for 50 years. Okay? I am an all above the board policy. I'm with the IBW 36 years. I was fortunate enough to be elected president of building trades. I have built coal plants. I have refueled nuclear reactors. I have stood on the fuel floor at 3 Mile Island. I've done combined cycle natural gas. I've installed solar, and believe it or not, I even hauled my fat body up a 450-foot windmill. I don't want to do it again, but I've done it. Okay? So, yeah, there is room for all sources of energy, and to Representative Rowe, the clean and the green. I would say this. Solar, wind is considered green. Clean is a definition to be determined, and there's a big difference in what is a determination of clean compared to probably me and some of my counterparts on the environmental side. But we have to have grid reliability. We have to have our baseload generation, and we have to be able to have it on demand as we need it. And right now, the renewable portfolio doesn't allow for that. If you're going to talk about reliable solar, then we got to talk about massive battery storage also. Because if you need to bring on a whole bunch of megawatts at 1 in the morning on a solar field, if you don't have battery storage, that's not going to happen. It's that simple. So if you read in my testimony, what I tried to explain to our former governor was we should have taken a page from Tom Ridge. We should have put an energy policy committee together, and we should develop an energy policy for Pennsylvania. And part of that has to include our renewables as we're moving to them slowly, albeit with a targeted, measured approach that makes sense. I don't really am a big fan of taking 16,000 acres of farm ground to replace TMI, and that's what it would take if you're going to cover it with solar panels. You took 825 megawatts of 24/7, 365 operation at Unit 1, and you took it offline. And if you want to replace that with solar panels, you're looking at 16,000 megawatts to equate that 825, and that's about 16,000 acres to replace one. So let's have a targeted, measured approach. Yeah, it's pretty astounding, isn't it? Yeah. So let's have a targeted, measured approach. I know you guys have some bills kicking around. Community solar utilizing our rooftops and our brownfield spaces, the solar for schools, and we could build 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gigawatts out. But at the same time, we need to prop up our baseload generation. Our coal is going to retire. We're down to 2 coal plants in Pennsylvania, Keycon. In 2028, they're going offline. They've already announced they're closing. But we need them for the next 5 years. We also need to help our gas industry. We need capacity payments that allow our generators to continue to operate efficiently and economically, and we also need to be able to spur more economic development in PA. It's the bottom line. If you want grid reliability going into 2028, 2029, we have to have the generational capacity. And when we lose this, we're sitting here talking about what are we going to do with the energy? Let's ask a bigger question. What are you going to do when you don't have those jobs? What are you going to do with the thousands of people that lose their jobs in that industry? And those are good paying jobs. Those are jobs with family standing wages and benefits and pensions and health care, and none of those constituents of this Commonwealth are drained on the social services system because they're all working. What are we going to do when those jobs go away? Then where are we? We're talking a bigger issue than just grid reliability, aren't we? So this whole energy policy has to be given a ton of thought. It has to be a targeted, measured approach. And when you look at the money available from the feds, to Mr. Rowe's point, we could be expanding into hydrogen over the next 10 to 15 years, not just for generation, but for our industrial sector, which is where a ton of our carbon comes from. We could be capping 8,000 abandoned wells spewing methane all over and keeping my natural gas plants running. And if we capped 1,000 a year, that's 8 years. We know of 8,000. There's 21 other 1,000 out there we got to find. Okay? We could target with, instead of subsidizing like New Jersey did, targeted energy. We could subsidize carbon capture and keep our gas fleets to our net zeros. But it's going to take a public investment along with a private investment. So our policymakers have to be the ones to drive that. I can't expect a power plant operator to invest $3 billion in carbon capture technology with the threat of a carbon tax offset hanging over his head. It's not feasible. Economically, why would he? And let's talk about the jobs that carbon capture brings here. Just for a couple of our large gas units to truly do carbon capture, that's about a $4 billion investment in jobs. Now, that's a lot of jobs. Josh, you and I have talked about that many times. That's a lot of jobs for Pennsylvanians. That's expanding our workforce and expanding our economic development. So grid reliability is a whole lot more than just grid reliability. And as you can read my testimony, you know why I submitted what I submitted, and I'll be glad to take any questions. I am an all-the-above guy, but I'm an all-the-above guy when it makes sense. And my last thing in there was, I had these conversations with the former governor, and they ignored us. We didn't have a seat at that table. Pennsylvania needs to derive its own energy policy that makes sense for Pennsylvanians. We want to be a part of the PJM grid, but I want to see my market-driven capacity here and my industry partners get a fair shake, and I want to see them be economically viable, and I want to see them continue to grow. I don't want to see Pennsylvania become an import state. We export, what, 45,000 megawatts a year, roughly, from Pennsylvania? Yeah. That's a lot of tax revenue coming back, too. Why would we want to give that up? Thank you. I'll take your questions after our colleagues are done.
Mr. Stark.
This is a great place to be. I appreciate the policy committee coming up here. As you said, I'm George Stark with Coterra Energy, and one of the benefits of you, the committee coming here, is you're not far from Susquehanna County. Susquehanna County is the only county that Coterra Energy operates and produces dry natural gas. In 2008, 15 years ago, and I know Representative Fritz, you will know this, the county produced no natural gas. Today, 15 years later, it's the largest county in America for the production of dry natural gas. One of the pieces that I wondered if Rob would get to is the two power plants that your union members built. Glenn, you mentioned the idea. We've got the most advanced energy generating facilities being produced here. The Moxie Freedom and Lackawanna Energy Center, each of them came in at $1 billion. They took several years to build, and they were built by union members. Coterra happens to be the sole provider of their natural gas. To give you some understanding of just the scope and scale of what we found here, it's impressive when you think about what a BCF of natural gas can do. And just to give you some idea, a BCF, 1 BCF would power 25,000 homes for a year. We produce 3 BCF every day today. Right here in one county, Susquehanna County, 3 BCF. You talked about the idea that it's homegrown. It's the cleanest energy. One of the fun pieces that I've had in this area, and Knoxon is not far from here, and again, I am in agreement with what has been said prior. We need all energy sources. We don't need to be discounting nuclear. Wind and solar have a place, but you need base load. But as we, Coterra, were drilling our natural gas wells, BP was building a wind farm. And I'm impressed with the 9,000 acres, 90 turbines. Wrap your mind, 9,000 acres, 90 turbines. They'll produce they'll produce enough energy in a year for 47,000 homes. I got internal. I did some quick math. We have one location in Susquehanna County, one pad site, 3 acres, 10 wells underneath it. Will produce that much energy in 48 hours. And in the next 48 hours, we'll do it again and again and again. That's the scope and scale of natural gas. That's the scope and scale of what we have underneath our feet right here. And again, we talk about grid reliability. Before it was attractive to be the MPV pipeline, I worked for a company that tried to get Constitution built. The Constitution pipeline, if you know Susquehanna County, we're limited to go north because we go into we go into Binghamton. That's New York. New York is not open for business when it comes to natural gas. Even though the grid in New England could utilize natural gas, we're precluded from new pipelines going north. So when I get concerned about grid reliability going northern, I see a problem. The benefit for us, though, Williams, our partner, was able to build Atlantic Sunrise. It's through Atlantic Sunrise that, working with the trades, we built the 2 modern facilities here in Pennsylvania. Our natural gas gets to Baltimore, it gets to Washington, D.C., and lo and behold, Johnny Fritz knows this answer, but it gets to Japan. In 28 days, production in Susquehanna County is burned and utilized in Japan. It was Pennsylvania natural gas that kept the Olympians in Japan cool in the last Olympics that were held in Japan. To give you again some idea of what's possible with the right policies. That's what we have. And you've heard it commented, whether it's a regulator or a generator, they need market direction. We have the ability to produce here the natural gas that's needed. We love producing electrification. We also work nicely with wind and solar, but you need us all. Again, we've had fun with the idea of, okay, how about this notion on the BP energy? We've also looked at what the true city of Philadelphia's energy needs are. What their energy needs are daily, we could produce from one location, one pad, once again, 10 wells underneath it, their needs for energy. That's what we have here. That's what we need to see. So from a policy, what we want to see moving forward, you're hearing it over and over and over again. Permit reforms. If you don't get the permit reforms, we can't build the pipelines. I leave you that we can't build north. I think there's grid reliability issues in New England. We can build in Pennsylvania, but it's the pipelines. We need to get our gas to areas where you can utilize it more efficiently. We have it here. We need to get it there. Those are the pieces I have for you. Glenn's already talked about it. We are the cleanest burning energy source. It's one thing to look at the United States as a whole, but I will tell you that Appalachia has the best, cleanest molecule, especially for electrification. We need to get out of our way. We need to bring the jobs here. We need to look at the policies and utilize the natural gas that we have underfoot to put people to work.
Thank you. I feel like we got 4 hearings potentials tied up into these 2 panels, and there will be more hearings because there's so many different things that we could talk about. I just want to reflect for a moment on some of the things that we had just heard. And George, or Mr. Stark, you talk about the production here in the last couple of years. Mr. Thomas, you talk about what happened to carbon emissions in Pennsylvania and in Ohio as well. Mr. Baer, you talk about the impact energy industry has on the building trades, on jobs, which jobs means, people obviously putting food on the table, but it also means revenue for local communities, for local school districts. How the revenues are going to be impacted once those coal-fired plants do shut down in those areas for school districts is dramatic. You're right, there's a socioeconomic impact that is often unstated. And I just think to myself, in this Commonwealth, we have seen great advancement over the course of the last 15 years. We've seen Shell come to Western Pennsylvania. We saw more manufacturing opportunities. Everything that we would want. Our environment is getting better with lower emissions. Our jobs are starting to come back. We're reindustrializing. We're making it here again, all without government interfering, all without a carbon tax, without an energy tax, with what we call, energy tax, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We're accomplishing these goals without government stepping into the system. And by the way, the subject of this hearing, our grid is exceptional. The reliability is there. We have a diverse grid. We got coal, we got gas, nuclear, some renewables as well. I just don't see the upside to us stepping in the way that we have the last 3 years. And I think the last 3 years we've seen lots of downside. Since we announced going into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the energy tax, the last administration, I think there's been, I just saw a chart on Tuesday of all of the investments that Ohio has seen. The power investments, the manufacturing investments since we announced, and compared the announcement of investment that Pennsylvania has seen, which is ridiculous. There's very little announcement of investment in Pennsylvania. And here we are, this state, literally the keystone state for energy in the Northeast, I would argue in the country, considering the diversity and the quantity that we have in the history. And we are just getting in the way of that type of progress. And I don't understand for what reason. Mr. Thomas, you had mentioned in your testimony, and I'd like to ask you more about this in particular, about economic forces basically driving renewable investment. My understanding of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not economic forces, it's the federal government and state government driving those with subsidies, with tax credits. Or is it, I was asking this a little bit on the last panel. I'd like to drill down more into it. If you can comment on that.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, energy generation is a very capital-intensive industry, right? I've heard it said it's the most capital-intensive industry there is. In order to attract capital, you have to have a economic climate that's going to attract that capital. In the old world, prior to restructuring, it was relatively straightforward. The utility would come to the Public Utility Commission and say, we need more generation. Then there'd be a fight over how much that new generation would cost, and then there'd be a fight about who pays for it. That was the way it was done. Now we're in a competitive market where we have to attract, we have to have a market set up that's conducive to attracting that capital. And we've seen that. I mean, the Moxie Freedom, the Moxie plants were built with private capital, several billions of dollars coming into this Commonwealth because the investors in that project thought it was an attractive investment, okay? That's when we were seeing, numbers like, 4,000 to 10,000 megawatts in the PJMQ. Now in Pennsylvania it's 211, right? So ultimately it is an economic question. And, one of the things that we have seen in like the last 15, 20 years is we've seen environmental policies absorbed into the market. We've seen, the MATS, the mercury air toxin regs, the CASPR, the cross-state air pollution regs, the ozone regs, NOx tax. We've seen environmental regulations absorbed into the market. And if the rules are set up the right way, the market can absorb that. However, the rules aren't set up the right way right now, and that's what FERC and PJM need to fix. That said, if some of these rules are punitive, I mean, some of those environmental regulations I mentioned led to closures. Certain facilities had to make the decision whether to invest $1 billion in scrubbers or close down, and some did in Pennsylvania. Some of your members did that. I mean, several Pennsylvania facilities, put upwards of $1 billion into improvements into their facilities because the economics justified it. Yeah. Well, in Homer City too. Yeah, they both did. Yeah. So if the economics are set up the right way, that helps a lot on the environmental side. But when you have, environmental pressure combined with economic signals that are saying retire, that's why I am sure Keystone and Conemaugh and Homer City would have numbers at which they stay in the market if they could get the revenues necessary to do it. It needs to stay in the market. They can't in today's market. So that's, I think, the trade-off you're looking at there. I hope that answered your question.
We've got about 14 more questions, but go ahead.
I think you're referring to the alternative energy portfolio standards that we're subsidizing solar and wind with.
Part of it. That's part of it. The federal subsidies as well.
They get a big bump, yes. And it allows them to bid into the grid auction payments at a much lower, at basically zero compared to our thermal generation. If they didn't have their subsidy payments, I don't know that they would be near so competitive, to answer your question.
And I saw on the graph the investment and what the investment is, where it's coming from, the percentage as far as the generation sources, and renewables is much larger as far as the future investment. Not as far as the actual, what it's actually producing, it's very small. And I'm very concerned that we are creating a grid reliability problem. We are incentivizing a grid reliability issue by what we are subsidizing from the feds and the state level. Because my point is, there was no grid reliable issue when we weren't doing all the subsidies, when we weren't doing all these things. It's remarkable to me. We are getting a worse product and paying more, and taxpayers and ratepayers are paying a lot more for it. What other realm of life or economics do you do that? Where you're actually, maybe, we are actually paying that much more for something that is a worse product. And not only a worse product, but a dangerous product. And not only a dangerous product, but those policies, Mr. Bear, are leading to your members, their jobs being in jeopardy. And we are losing across the board with our energy policy, and it's all self-inflicted. And I just don't know. I'm trying to figure out what the upside is. When you talk about carbon emissions dropping so much, and then you look at what China's doing with carbon emissions and how they have no regulations, and the rare earth mining and all this other stuff that you can get into, we're not going to today. I'm dumbfounded as to how silly and our energy policy has become, when we had it all, and now we're creating problems for ourselves with jobs. We're creating problems with ourselves with reliability. We're creating problems with ourselves with security. Does anyone really want to be dependent on Chinese-produced energy when we have all of this natural gas underneath us? That's all solar panels are, really, is Chinese-produced energy. I mean, at this point in time, I'm dumbfounded by it. Representative Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I read a statistic this morning. We've spent $5 trillion globally, governments have, over the past 20 years on green, renewable, clean energy development. And we went from 80, and again, these numbers might be slightly off, but the point is there. We went from 86% reliance on fossil fuels to 84% in that time. So $5 trillion and 2%. And I think I joked when Chairman Kale mentioned, what do we pay for that we pay more for that we get a lesser product, and education is one of those. And the reason I think that is, if you ever look at a chart of inflation in the United States and you look at the services and everything that are going up faster than the rate of inflation and ones that are going down, the ones on the top of that list are education and essentially anything that the government subsidizes. Anything that the government is involved in, the price is increasing at an exponential rate. So, and we talk about subsidies. Subsidies is one thing. From a macro perspective, you're talking about ESG policy. So we're talking about investments, private equity, sure, is coming in and investing in a lot of these products. Well, they're incentivized and sometimes mandated to do so. And that's all trickling down from we're talking S&P 500 companies are rated on ESG, which is a very subjective thing, and part of which is the E part, which is energy. And you have companies like Tesla that are rated lower than others just because of these crazy standards. So I'm a capitalist. I think that we should let the free market decide this stuff. And what could we do from our perspective? Like it sounds like this isn't going to be solved, but overnight. But how could we help you from a policy perspective? And I'll go to you, Mr. Thomas. How could we help you? And I think part of it is just standing up to some of these crazier policies and being realistic. But like, what could we do from our perspective to help this?
Yeah, no, appreciate the question greatly. And have hearings like this, get educated on these issues is huge. These energy markets are incredibly important. They're incredibly complicated, but the vigilance of public policymakers over these markets is critical. I'm sure in your packet you saw the letter from the Ohio legislators that they sent to PJM expressing some of their concerns. I mean, getting engaged with PJM, saying that it's important to you to have these rules reflected in a way such that we can sustain our goals. I mean, let me give you one specific example, because, the subject of subsidies has come up multiple times. So Pennsylvania's interstate market competing with resources in other states. Like I mentioned, New Jersey has chosen a path of subsidies. New Jersey's going to, let me pick on New Jersey's nuclear subsidy program. So New Jersey is providing $300 million a year in subsidies to its nuclear facilities. Those facilities are in a market competing against, the Moxie plant, nuclear facilities in Pennsylvania, in the region, okay? But those plants, and Rob mentioned this a little bit too, they can now bid into the market at zero because they're getting a subsidy that's making up for all their costs. What does that do to the unsubsidized resource in Pennsylvania? It either knocks them out of the market or forces them to bid in at a lower price so they can clear the market. There used to be a rule in place called the minimum offer price rule that basically said, all right, if you get subsidized, a state, if you want to do that, that's fine, you can subsidize, but when you bring that resource to market, it's going to come in at a competitive level, okay? That rule was eliminated in 2021 by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission with the support of PJM. That's a problem for Pennsylvania resources, and that's a protection for our resources that was in place 3 years ago that is now gone. So getting engaged with issues like that, again, it's complicated stuff, it's detailed stuff, but it's critically important.
And keep in mind, I appreciate you're a capitalist, but you're also a legislator. And one of the things that I've always said was, if we're going to invest funds of a public body, we have to ask ourselves, what's our ROI? And the gentleman is exactly right. If we're going to invest in energy policy and energy technology in Pennsylvania, and we want to talk about grid reliability, then we need to invest in technology that will actually make an impact, and it's going to take 5 or 10 years. Let's look at repurposing Homer City and Conemaugh and turning them into SMR sites, small modular reactors. You could put 3 to 4 of them on that site at 300 megawatts apiece. And if you gave the tax credits to entice the business to come here, and then we bid that energy into the market at the market rate when they came online, we would be fixing our grid reliability problem. We would be having a level playing field for our gas producers. We could be investing in our carbon capture technology for getting to our net zero eventually. All right, we all want to protect the environment, but we never did the crawl, walk, run. We did the crawl, stop, and now we're in the sprint.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really where we're at. We all remember in the 90s we were doing scrubbers, and then we kind of stopped. And all of a sudden, now we're supposed to fix 50 years worth of problems in the short term with flawed energy policies, which are going to affect the grid. So as policymakers, and as the guys that are going to be negotiating into the budgets for the years to come, and negotiating economic policies with the governor, and if you want to have grid reliability, then start investing tax credits in energy industry that will fix our problem, bring good paying jobs, keep our markets competitive, have a level playing field for all of our energy producers, and then talk about expanding. Let's build that big LNG export facility down in Chichester, and instead of just shipping natural gas to China, let's ship it to all of Eastern Europe.
There you go.
And to Representative Rose point. Okay, we're not going to be able to fix the world's problems. We should be the leader. And if we can even get half this world burning natural gas, maybe they're not doing carbon capture, but we are doing our part to help lower greenhouse gas emissions while utilizing a resource that's right underneath our feet. We're creating thousands of good paying jobs. We're giving our drillers a new market to sell their gas to. And we're bracing up our grid for grid reliability. Now, I know I'm just an electrician, but it really isn't this complicated. It's really not.
And just to build on that,
Electricity is magic. Yeah. So an electrician might as well be a
magician. I can tell you this. You can't see it, you can't smell it, but if you touch it, you'll know it.
It's magic.
But when you think about what the comment was made there is if, the work's already gone into it. If you would take the top 5% worst emitters, which are coal-powered plants in Eastern Europe, those 5% could be moved to natural gas, you would save 40% of the emissions we're talking about. So again, when you think about trillions of dollars being spent, why don't we focus this, target it? We know which ones are the worst polluters.
And you have a solution with your gas to prevent that.
And I'll just add on, because I like numbers, with no subsidies in that 15-year time frame in Susquehanna County, remember, it's just Susquehanna County, we've invested $10 billion. There's 47,000 people that live in the county. They've received, in addition to the $10 billion that we've spent, and we cannot build a pipeline, you cannot build a compressor station without union workforce. You can't do it. So that $10 billion would call into effect what they've done for us. It's a much more resilient pipeline system where it can get gas around Pennsylvania. The landowners in Susquehanna County, who are the owners of that mineral, $3.2 billion they've received. So again, this is economic development unto itself. This is what you're seeing. And again, 15 years ago, it didn't exist. I stressed the 15 years ago it didn't exist because you can't tell me you can predict what's going to be the future 15 years from now. They'd have told you were silly if you were going to drill for natural gas in Susquehanna County. We know it's in Wayne. We know it's in Pike. We can get to it. Let us do that in the cleanest possible fashion.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George Stark, Robert Baer, thank you guys for your testimony. Mr. Glenn Thomas, so I'm a visual guy, and your slide number 6 communicated that carbon emissions have plummeted in Pennsylvania. And I'll compound that. I spent several years on the Pennsylvania Environmental Resources and Energy Council, where we did hear scientific and peer-reviewed studies that did substantiate that we have, in fact, far exceeded the lofty goals put forward by the Obama administration. So we're doing it. Pennsylvania, some of my environmentalist friends say, hey, we need to go green, but I'm going to contend that we have, in fact, gone clean in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's gone clean. I want the copyright on that, gang, okay? Just putting that out there. Pennsylvania's gone clean. So with that in mind, that catchphrase clean, fast forward to slides 20, 21, and 22, which you share with us the policy coming out of New Jersey, Maryland, and Illinois. And I'll just state that I would never want to emulate the policy coming out of those states. But in there, it says that they are looking to transition to 100% clean sources by a particular year, 2035, 2035, and 2050 in Illinois. But we see clean as in quotation marks. Help me to understand what is clean energy by their definition? Because I think we found that clean energy in Pennsylvania. It's natural gas. So how are they looking to go clean?
Yeah, I'm chuckling because Senator Yaw asked me the same question when I testified in front of him 3 weeks ago. But yeah, the way it is in quotation marks because it's not crystal clear, but net carbon neutral is how they appear to be defining it. And you're going to ask, what does that mean? which is a fair question. That
It's
we don't know.
nebulous.
Yeah, it's nebulous. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for clarifying.
So, neutral,
Yes.
does that include the production of the source of energy? Because there's a lot of coal that's burned to make a solar panel.
No, it doesn't include that.
Minerals that are
No.
mined.
No. It does not. It does not include that. I think what it's allowed to do, what it's designed to do, is allow for carbon sequestration to be put. Well, there are no coal plants in New Jersey, but on gas plants in New Jersey, or conversions to hydrogen or things like that. I think they're allowing room for that, but no, they have not put a lot of details, at least as far as I've seen, on that.
It just seems to me, and I keep hammering this, but it just seems to me that if we were to tip the scales, we would tip the scales to help our own jobs, to help our own industries, to help the natural gas industry, to help building trades, to help development. But we just keep tipping the scales to help foreign manufacturing of goods that are using very unclean sources of energy
Well, yeah, and
to
I
produce it.
would respectfully submit in Pennsylvania that really doesn't tip the scales at all and just allows the market to do it all. We've done really well.
That's exactly it. We don't need the scales being
We don't
tipped.
need it, right? Just put your fingers on them.
Yeah.
Just let the market
10
do what it
billion we'll
does,
spend.
and we will naturally see a transition to some more renewable energy, because renewable energy is becoming more cost competitive. It's becoming more, there are some buyers that affirmatively want it. That's great. Let consumers drive the marketplace, but let them drive the marketplace rather than these arbitrary numbers that are really hard to square with reality and really hard to square with the physics of the grid that demands a certain amount of power, a certain amount of electrons to keep the lights on. So,
Do the definition of carbon neutral in relation to the grid reliability. Okay? Carbon neutral has to include carbon sequestration. It has to. All right? We all want to get to a net zero. It's going to take an investment to get there. I don't know of any natural gas generator that wouldn't still love to lower its emissions. Cap and trade, I don't see myself, I'm not an expert, I don't see the benefit in it. It's costs you money, you're buying it, you're still polluting. So let's talk about how do we get to net zero. Carbon sequestration is a great way to get there. That has to be in here. It has to be. And it's going to take a huge investment, but we got to make it economically viable for the companies to make the investment. We all want to get there. It's how and when. Do we want to burn hydrogen in our industrial facilities, which is very clean? Yeah. Do I want to build 2 hydrogen facilities in Pennsylvania? Oh, absolutely. I want to put one in the Mon Valley, and I want to put one down into Delaware. And I want to take the hydrogen that comes from his natural gas, even though it's blue and not green right now, and I want to use it, and I want to sell it, and I want Mon Valley Steel to use hydrogen in their plants. And do we eventually get our SMRs built out and get to green hydrogen? Sure. And do we replace our coal industry with another reliable baseload that gives us 100% grid reliability? Yes. Can we do it in 10 years? No.
No.
Can we do it in 20 years? We're moving there. Can we get there in 30 years? And in 30 years, it's not going to be my problem anymore. I hope Mike has it on his plate standing at the back with me. But we also owe it to the planet, to Pennsylvania, to start this process. And when you hold these policy hearings, it's important that everybody understands that we have 2 entrenched sides, but somewhere in the middle of there is the answer. How do we protect the grid? How do we protect the constituents of the Commonwealth? How do we have our economic viability? Because you know as well as I do, I'm a jobs guy. I am a jobs guy. I'm a workforce development guy. I'm an economic development guy, bottom line. And Pennsylvania is the heaviest energy state on the East Coast. Our whole industry is built on, our economy in this Commonwealth has been built on industry and power for the last 50 years. We can't just stop that. We can't. It would ruin us, and we need our grid reliability. All right? Would I like to put 100,000 chargers in for electric vehicles? Sure. Sure. Where are we getting the power for them? It's not there right now. So, as policymakers, you've heard from the drillers, the industry, the trades, even the grid. You got a big job ahead of you. but you can do it.
I appreciate that. It just seems like we continue to incentivize instability within our grid. It's dumbfounding. All right, Representative Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when Governor Wolf first proposed RGGI, they did a study that studied the surrounding neighbor RGGI states that were already part of the greenhouse gas initiative, and they found that with Pennsylvania's free market shift to natural gas, our rates went down and our emissions went down faster than the RGGI member states, where the rates went up. So we had rates go down, we had emissions go down, not being part of the greenhouse gas initiative, which is just an energy tax. But seeing those other neighbor states where they had it, their rates went up and their emissions went down much slower. So, and it's Mr. Thomas, your graphs here all bears that information out. It was great to see it reinforced. So, you know, whether you're looking at it from the environmental side, the emission side, the ratepayer side, the taxpayer side, the greenhouse gas initiative, the energy tax is a loser on all fronts. And, you know, like you referenced, Mr. Thomas, the chairman stole one of my questions, talking about those economic markers, those drivers. You know, we saw $10 billion in investment from you guys alone, from Mr. Stark, from you guys alone, and that wasn't taxpayer subsidized investment, that was private investment. Now you look at the shift to Illinois, where, you know, they are subsidizing $1.28 billion in taxpayer funding for these renewables because they are currently not competitive in the market. Now, if we could get to the point where you can say, hey, nobody needs a subsidy and energy, everybody's competing on a level playing field, that's where I would like to be. But when you are saying, hey, we're going to take away $10 billion of private investment and we're going to shift that burden onto the taxpayers who now have to pay for subsidies because we've shut down access to other energy, you know, I think that's a loser. So my concern is, as we look at sort of where energy policy in Pennsylvania is being pushed, it's not outlandish to think that while we're, you know, farther down the road, that eventually we'll end up with the environmental lobby pushing us into something like Illinois. You know, I would not have thought that us being pushed into the greenhouse gas initiative in an economic powerhouse state like PA would have been possible 10, 15 years ago, but here we are. So fast forward 10, 15 years ago, we might be looking at maybe it's 2050 or 2055, but this sort of Illinois policy is it's quite possible that we come to that. So in an energy-heavy state like Pennsylvania, what does following the example of Illinois mean? What does it mean for the ratepayers? What does it mean for the investors? What does it mean for the workers who build these plants, who provide the energy? What does it mean? I mean, I think it's important. We can discuss the top-level, you know, policy points, but what does that mean for the guy that shows up for work, who's trying to put food on his family's table? What does it mean for the single mother trying to pay that heating bill in the winter? What does it mean for the senior citizen who already can't make ends meet? What does following this sort of progressive, rushed environmental policy mean for Pennsylvanians?
So when you guys do your visit down to PJM, which I highly encourage you to do, ask that question. Say, if every state in the PJM footprint adopted Illinois' policy, what would our grid look like? I'm pretty sure the answer you get back is, you know, we wouldn't have enough power to meet the needs. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, if every state did what Illinois is doing, or what New Jersey's doing. I can't quite put Maryland in that bucket yet, but they're getting close. But if every state adopted that, there wouldn't be enough power on the system to meet the needs. It's that simple.
Do you guys have any projections on what that impacts for jobs? Like you said, I mean, you guys your number one thing is jobs, right? And this industry, I don't know the exact number of how many hundreds of thousands of jobs relate to the energy industry in Pennsylvania, but if we're not exporting energy to Japan anymore, and if we're not creating our own homegrown energy, what does that mean for your members?
Oh, it's crushing, especially to a lot of my trades members, my boilermakers, my fitters, my carpenters, my laborers, the electricians, of course, that build the powerhouses. It's crushing. And that's why look, I signed on to the lawsuit as the building trades. The IBW signed on to the lawsuit. The Boilermaker signed on to the lawsuit to prevent RGGI. It's crushing to us, okay? It's not that we don't want a clean environment. We just don't want it that way, okay? We need to preserve the jobs. And, you know, you talk about all these green energy jobs that are coming. Well, there again, what's the definition of a good job? Because, and I'll give you an example, our former governor contracted with Constellation for 190 megawatts of solar energy to be bought back by the state of Pennsylvania. And he did it under a power purchase agreement, did not apply prevailing wage to it, and those jobs are not paying family-sustaining wages and benefits. All right, that's going on all over the Commonwealth. SEPTA did a 20-megawatt job in southern Franklin County. They didn't pay family-sustaining wages and benefits. So it's very hard to talk about a green transition if we're not going to talk about real jobs, especially as a building trades guy. Okay? Now, I know some of you on this panel may differ with me and my idea on prevailing wage and Davis-Bacon, but at the end of the day, if we're spending funds of a public body, maybe that guy doesn't belong to a union. Maybe he's an open shop tradesman, but if he's working on that project, shouldn't he be getting a family-sustaining wage and benefit if you're working in the green energy sector? So how, you know, I have a hard time with that. I like gas. I like coal. I like nuclear. All right? It's no secret. I love nuclear. If we could build baseload nukes at $9 billion apiece over this country,
Day in and day out.
I'd be happy. But for me, an energy policy has to involve economic viability, and it has to have that big jobs component to make Pennsylvania viable. And it has to have the grid reliability issue in there. It's got to be the SMRs. It's got to be the gas. It's got to be the ones that create jobs. I live in Juniata County, which you represent part of. 16,000 people. And let me tell you, there's not a whole lot of industry there. Your district in the northern side, show me your big manufacturer in Juniata County. Put an SMR there. All of a sudden, that's a game changer, isn't it? You have the 500K lines to do it.
That's the point.
Put it there. That's a game changer. Those are economic jobs that bring vitality to your area and, guess what, give you grid reliability. It's about jobs for us.
Representative Rowe, to take on that question, likewise, from our standpoint, API commissioned a study. It just came out last week, so if you wouldn't mind, I'll read, because I don't know these numbers like some of the others I do. But our industry, the energy industry, oil and natural gas, with the support of the trades, 423,000 jobs in Pennsylvania. 93,000 of them are, if you would, in the industry. 330,000 are indirect. We're also providing $40.3 billion in labor income to the state, and we contributed $75 billion to Pennsylvania's gross domestic product. Those are the numbers for last year. So when you talk about an Illinois project, and it's a little different, but if the goal is to shut down fossil fuel plants, well, then you don't need these people. So I can't say it's 100% that it will all be gone, but if you're leading that way and you're saying that's not necessary, there's part of your input that's going to be affected. And again, where's the money going to come from to support our things that we can't control?
If I could just add one more complication, because you're getting a lot of numbers thrown at you, but let me so Illinois' policy is going to lead to the closure of certain facilities in their state. We've established that. PJM then did a study of what's going to be required of the transmission system to adopt to the fact that Illinois is closing these plants. $2 billion in transmission upgrades are going to be required, mostly in Ohio, by the way, not in Illinois, to make up for the shortfall that it's going to be caused by Illinois and Pennsylvania too. Yeah, and Pennsylvania is getting a little bit piece of that, but it's mostly Ohio. Brandon Shores is a plant in Maryland. It's closing down. The transmission upgrades are going to be over $1 billion associated with that, and a lot of them are in Pennsylvania. Is anybody from York County? I thought I heard maybe somebody. Maybe you're close. Yeah, they might be in some of your areas. Some of the transmission areas upgrades are going to be necessary. So my point is, it's not just the closures and the reliability. Then you got to reconfigure the transmission system that comes at a cost to everybody associated with that.
Thank you. That was all exactly the info I was looking for. Thank you very much. I think that practical reality of what these policies do, how it affects on the granular level, I think is really important to talk about, because a lot of these policies, they sound great on paper, right? Everything's clean, everything's whatever, but then you actually go, okay, but also if we've lost 400,000 jobs and rates are going up and workers are leaving the state, that's a net loser. I used to be a teacher in Southeast Asia, and in Manila, your license plate number determines what day of the week you're allowed to drive your car. And I mean, as we're seeing in California, you can't charge your car car these days, the grid's collapsing. I mean, that's the sort of things that, in the United States, we shouldn't even have to consider, especially because we are such an energy-rich state. And by pushing these mandates, like you said, Mr. Baer, you're pushing these mandates without giving the market time to catch up. You're going to end up with these job losses, unreliability, all those issues. So I want to thank you guys very much for your testimony. This has been very helpful and enlightening to me. I appreciate it.
Mr. Kale knows a bunch of his constituents are not working in southwestern PA. They're working in Ohio, and that's Sean Steffi's Boilermakers. They're working on natural gas generation plants being built 10 miles across the border.
And West Virginia.
There's
a chip plant.
And you've lost hundreds of jobs in your district alone. Hundreds.
Representative Flick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stark, thanks for your comments. Thanks to all three of you for your comments. Your comments on Japan are well taken. Mr. Thomas, you said for us to get educated, and Mr. Baer, you have more common sense than 102 people that I know. So I would just
let's say 202, 202, 203.
Don't crucify me. There is a D behind my name.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm glad that Representative Rowe just spoke. And to your point, Mr. Thomas, of getting educated, I don't know, about 6 or 7 weeks ago, Representative Rowe and Representative Ledbetter and myself had an opportunity to spend time with officials from Taiwan. And last year, Representative Rowe and I also had an opportunity to spend time with officials from Taiwan. So right now they import 6%, Taiwan, of their natural gas from the USA. Could you imagine if that was 16%, what that would mean to Pennsylvania? Any comments or thoughts from anybody on that? And I believe, David, you also opened a Pennsylvania office a couple years ago in Taiwan. Is that correct? Yeah, yes. You want to speak on that?
Yeah, just the export office that's sort of a concierge for Pennsylvania manufacturers and energy producers to export. Governor Wolf had closed that, and as part of the budget negotiations last year or 2 years ago, I forget, we were able to reopen that. So, I mean, going forward, if you guys, if this does provide an opportunity for some sort of export opportunity, we can definitely connect you with the office there.
Well, when we can export our natural gas, if we build our Chichester facility, keep in mind, too, that's part of carbon capture, all right? When we're going to be creating greenhouse gases, but we can do carbon capture at that facility. Carbon sequestration. So not only are we using our resource here and selling it, we're doing it even cleaner than we are now. And guess what? That builds more jobs into that pipeline for us. And it builds a whole lot of economic development in Pennsylvania. And guess where all them workers are spending their money? Right here in Pennsylvania.
Yep. Vice Chairman Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We alluded to this a little earlier in talking about the alternative energy portfolios standards and AEPS. We know, obviously Reggie's kind of top of mind now. That's the first battle, the energy tax. I think we're making headway there. The governor's kind of been wishy-washy on that, but I think ultimately pressure is going to be there to back away from that. However, the next target, and I think that's what we got to look at, the next policy is going to be changing the AEPS formula and how that's from my perspective, that's the next task that the environmental groups and the folks that believe, look, we can all agree that this environmental policy that's being pushed they'll just find something else. They'll take another task. So I think as folks that are supportive of the industry realize that the needs for reliable energy, we need to look at the next task as well, the next thing on the horizon. What do you folks, you three gentlemen, see as problems with, again, we've talked about how difficult these subsidies are and why there's such a push for some of these renewables. It's because of these subsidies. Obviously, changing the APS system and the tiers and boosting up some of these is going to have a huge impact. Again, put reliability into grid reliability into jeopardy. So, can you speak a little bit about that and some dangers in screwing around with that portfolio?
Sure. And maybe I should say these are going to be my personal remarks, not necessarily P3's. P3 doesn't have a position on AEPS. But my personal preference, as somebody who's been following Pennsylvania energy policy for years, I'd rather see demand-side incentives than supply-side mandates. I just think that's, having Pennsylvania consumers being drivers of the marketplace is the better long-term place to be. The other thing, too, as part of that conversation, I think you have to have an honest conversation about how much, the recs that are being created by the AEPS Act are really driving investment. Because I think at the end of the day, you'll find out that they're really not driving the investment. It's mostly the, production tax credit and the investment tax credit, which are federal, okay? So, does it make for great bumper stickers and great sound bites for some? Maybe, but at the end of the day, is it really moving the market in a positive direction, for those resources? I would submit probably not that much. So, I look at these states that have put out demand. Like I said, I think, again, Pennsylvania has nothing to be, ashamed of here. The renewable investment in Pennsylvania has been significant. Take a look at those, the number of projects that are in the queue. We have seen facilities, and George mentioned the wind farm, and we have seen investments in renewables in this state to a very significant degree without some of the aggressive AEPSs that we've seen in other states. So that's my personal view.
And to that point, I think to highlight this PAQ is alarming. I mean, we see over. I mean, I'm just kind of looking at eyeballing this, but almost 75% of it looks like it's in solar.
Yeah. And there's another issue associated with the intermittent resources that needs to be considered. Because they're intermittent resources, they don't have the same reliability value as, say, a coal, a nuclear, or a gas plant. And I'll just give you one number, for example, like offshore wind. New Jersey's pursuing 11,000 megawatts of offshore wind. That has what's called a 20% ELCC. I'm not going to explain what that is, but 20% value to it. So in reality, even though they're building 11,000, the ability to produce 11,000 megawatts, the reliability contribution of that is probably about 250 megawatts, okay? Solar has similar, reductions. And the more you add on to the system, the lower those contributions get. Each incremental solar resource, does not bring the same reliability as the one before it because, like I mentioned, we're moving to a winter peaking system. The solar's not available at that time unless it has a battery with it. So that's a long way of saying, even though, what number are you looking at there? Is that the 15,000 number? Even though you're looking at 15,000 megawatts of solar in the queue, the reliability and value of that is probably, in the 2,000 to 3,000 megawatt range, depending on how PJM applies the rules to it. So that's a consideration as well.
Yeah, and to Mr. Baird, to your point earlier, you kind of referred to how much farmland it takes to replace a TMI. I can tell you, my constituents in Adams County, nothing gets them more angry when they're taking up farmland away and putting in these solar farms. You wanna create. It's almost like taking over the battlefield in Gettysburg. I could tell you that and putting in things that aren't exciting there. So that is something that constituents in my neck of the woods that might not understand have a different priority as far as energy is concerned. When you start taking farmland away for solars, I'm telling you, there's nothing that gets people riled up more.
Well, and that's why we had spoke about a targeted, measured, concise renewable portfolio for Pennsylvania. I am a firm believer in community solar. I am. I love being able to cover 1 million square foot warehouses and brownfield sites that we aren't currently using with solar panels. It makes sense. We're not using them now. If we can put them on our schools and take our school loads off the grid, and we're targeting them specifically and lowering our energy usage in our high use industries to start, it's a great place to start. It's not right now, to me, to say, can we go utility scale solar? You just heard the reliability issues. So, I think Pennsylvania needs to have a targeted approach to renewables. I'm not going to even say green energy. I'm going to say renewables. They do have a place in Pennsylvania, but it's up to us as constituents of the Commonwealth to decide the path forward. And I want to be clear. I don't mind my environmental friends. I have quite a few of them, and we have very spirited discussions, okay? I represent for my people, they represent for their side. And I can appreciate everything that we've done the last 25 years, 30 years to clean up this environment. And we still do have a ways to go. But we also have an obligation to make Pennsylvania work for Pennsylvanians. And it's our job to find that middle, all right? It's our job. It's our job for our children and our next generations. And we can get there. And we can get there with a sensible, targeted, measured approach. You know, crawl, walk, run, not crawl, sprint. Let's reset. Let's take a look at where we're at. Let's take a look at what we need for grid reliability. Let's look at the next generation coming forward. Is it SMRs? Is it carbon capture, carbon sequestration, hydrogen? All of those are in play, and all of those create really good paying jobs in Pennsylvania. And at the end of the day, and I know Representative Rowe and I would agree on that, it may take a long time, but it does get us to where we want to be, and it does accomplish what our environmental friends also want. It's just not always at the same timeline. Thank you.
Yeah, common sense, market-based solutions seems to be the theme here to drive everything, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you, gentlemen.
Can I just
Really,
have one point
please.
on the queue, because I think this is an important point too, because you're looking at that 15,000 megawatt number. Historically, only about 10 to 15% of the projects in the queue get built. So don't assume that 15,000 is coming in, and even when it does, like I said, the reliability contribution is even less. So that's a big part of the reason why we're headed to reliability problems in this area.
Yep, and again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Cabell. I think this has been a really, really good, enlightening hearing. Appreciate it.
Representative Ledbetter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Cabell and Representative Fritz, for hosting this panel this morning. One of the biggest benefits I've found in being a legislator is having the opportunity to speak with subject matter experts like yourself and being able to extract the detail for such important conversations, energy generation and sustainability, reliability within the Commonwealth, of course, being one of those discussions. Mr. Stark, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Baer, thank you both. Thank you all for being here. When I've listened to the testimony, I have pages of notes here filled, and it's been very insightful. But perhaps one of the most troubling things that I've taken away from this, and I've yet to determine a direction, which hopefully in discussion and dialogue with my colleagues and continued discussion with you all as stakeholders, we'll be able to refine that, is the lack of the proven technology and reliability to what is being labeled or deemed as innovative. And to compound that concern, the requirement or incentivized push in replacing the reliable nature of our legacy energy generation methods. Representative Eckert mentioned the PAQ on slide 16 of your deck, Mr. Thomas, and the solar dominance that makes up that diagram. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, my question will come at the end after providing brief context and to be analogous for but a moment. I find one of the things that's unique about this discussion in particular is the lack of excitement around the technology and innovation for these alternative means of energy production. And to be analogous, I think back to a period of transition in that of communication that I lived through. I remember as a kid the first home computer that came into our house. I also remember the first time I saw one of my parents take a call from a moving car with a phone. It was something that was exciting. It was something that just boggled my mind. Yet when we look at the discussion of energy and reliability, and we look at the innovation on the technologies that are arising there, that excitement is lost, and it's actually met and replaced with concern for valid and good reason, all of which you three have done an excellent job of outlining. When you look at a Nokia 1011 phone, right, in 1992, it had 1.5 hours of talk time. In 2004, those Palm Trios, right? You guys remember those with the stylus? That's 6 hours of talk time. And in 2023, the Apple 14 iPhone has 24 hours of talk time. It would be insane and ludicrous in the mid-90s to propose that cell phones should replace landlines when they had an hour and a half of talk time. And yet here we are within this energy discussion talking about how through vehicles such as ESG, federal mandates, incentives at the federal and state level, horrible programs like RGGI that punish not only residents of the Commonwealth, but then hurt business and infrastructure and the economy. Here we are talking about rolling out technology that has yet to justify its ability to meet or exceed historical and legacy methods of energy production, and prioritizing it as if we were to prioritize the elimination of landlines and replacing of cell phones in the early 90s. So to conclude and to pose my question, you all have outlined different factors that have put us in this position. And as legislators, Mr. Baer, you reminded Representative Cabell, while I also am a capitalist as he is, as I'm sure the rest of the panel is, we also are legislators, and our job is to legislate. So if we were to Pareto out some of these factors that have put us in this position, and we were to rank them so that we could have a punch list of 1, 2, 3 things to really drill into collectively as a caucus and as representatives for our district. I'm curious to know what that thing would be that you would encourage us to focus in on so that we can really unpack, dig in, and then try to be as beneficial in solving this issue as possible.
Now, this is just my opinion as an electrician in a suit with a good-looking hat. But I would say one of the things that you should concentrate on first and foremost is how do we keep our generational capacity we have and not lose additional? What's that going to take? Then I would say we need to concentrate on making sure that we can get PJM accountable to level the playing field for all our players here in Pennsylvania, especially for our thermal industries. And then my third priority, if I were you, would be how do I embrace the technology that's coming and how do I make it economically viable for my private industry to come to Pennsylvania to invest in carbon capture, sequestration, SMRs, additional gas plants, and how we can increase the economic engine that Pennsylvania has, while at the same time protecting our environment. And this is just my opinion, I truly believe one of the reasons why RGGI reared its ugly head was we hit that wall of cleaning up our environment. We made great strides, and then we did kind of stop. And I think this whole idea of carbon tax was driven because we just really stopped. And they went to, instead of the carrot and stick, they went to the carrot or the 2x4, okay, and in layman's terms. So overall, all of us, and I'm putting all of us in there, business, industry, labor, we all kind of dropped the ball. So now we're from crawl to stop to sprint. So we target those areas. If I were you, that's what I would do. I don't know what you would do, and I don't begin to speak for any of you, but as a sensible approach to Pennsylvania, that's where I would go, because all three of those things will accomplish what we want to do in Pennsylvania. It'll continue to build jobs. It'll continue to attract economic investment in the private sector. And at the end of the day, as we make money and we spend money, our small business gets propped up in Pennsylvania, and we have a strong economy.
Yeah, the first one, and it may seem obvious, but it's get to know PJM and get involved in PJM. And I would respectfully submit to you all that, I mean, PJM hears from other legislators from other states that have very different agendas than you all. They hear from them, and they hear from them loudly. you all need to be in that room, being just as loud and being just as vocal with them. And that's something, because if PJM doesn't work, none of this is going to work. I mean, we need, for Pennsylvania to be successful, PJM needs to be successful. And that wholesale market needs to feed our retail market in a way that's productive. So that would be number one. Number two would be trust the Pennsylvania consumer. I think the Pennsylvania consumer can do a lot here in terms of driving this marketplace. And the marketplace will respond. George's companies will respond. My members will respond. And his members will build the stuff. I mean, the consumers can drive the marketplace. And then the third one, and maybe counterintuitive, is, get out of the way. Don't be getting in the way of things. Just let this thing work, because it can work. It has worked. We've seen it work. Just let it work.
I'll add on, Representative, that sometimes when you're looking at the target, today we're talking about electrification. As a natural gas producer, as a driller, it's one of our markets that we feed, but they want to keep me in the ground through efforts. Don't lose sight of electricity doesn't make anything. The building blocks for agriculture are fertilizer. The building blocks for fertilizer are natural gas. So in this effort, when you're looking at one particular chapter of energy policy and you're thinking, what am I going to do for grid reliability? And it's an important factor. But there is a whole nother hearing here on what are we talking about, keep it in the ground. Because keeping it in the ground will have a problem. And this is what we get frustrated by, because you can't make renewables without us. You can't make steel, you can't make cement, and you can't make fertilizers without the building blocks. So in that punch list, when you're looking, yes, we're going to produce natural gas for electricity. We like that. It's firm load for us. But they're not coming at us just from an electrification standpoint. They're coming at us from keep us in the ground, and that's what concerns us. So big picture look as you go down that punch list. What will this mean to this? We don't need that pipeline because there's not going to be a... No, you need the pipeline for the glass manufacturer who's going to make the solar panel. So can't lose sight of that.
Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, if I just may have some attitude in conclusion. The sentiment here is heard loud and clear. I am the father to a 6-year-old, and if she were to clean her room but just take all of the mess and put it into the room next to it, it wouldn't be clean. And it seems like that's what the advocates for the other states that are outlined in here, whether it be Illinois or Maryland, seem to be doing. So I will look forward to continue to work with you all in that spirit, and my colleagues here in this panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Watrow.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Cabell and Rep. Fritz, thank you for having this policy committee hearing today. Not so much a question, but more a statement. Mr. Bear, great testimony today. Really got a lot out of it. My statement is some takeaways I got, very important. I like to really scale things down for the ratepayer. Some testimony given today by Mr. Bennett earlier on was 65 million customers. That's a savings of $3 to $4 billion a year. That's a lot. That's a ton of money. Next to Mr. Thomas, you gave testimony. Pennsylvania electricity rates were once 15-20% above the national average. Now we're consistently below the national average. We have a lot to say. Mr. Stark, you mentioned, and people might say, we're giving our resources to Japan, right? But how is Pennsylvania benefiting from it? That's jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? All right, Representative Cabell, if you'd like to give some closing remarks.
I will keep it brief. I think we could sit here for hours and hours and hours, and I think the chairman and I were just talking. I think this conversation will continue. I will leave you with three things I think we need to stay focused on, and three phrases that were mentioned today, and it should be the theme moving forward. Expansion, not transition. Crawl, walk, run, and let the market decide. I think we focus on those three things. As policymakers, as stakeholders, we will be in a really good spot here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you to all of the presenters, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Fritz.
Chairman, don't have a whole lot to say. Just very, very thankful for all the very worthwhile testimony today. And I'll close with this. I'm going to head to the J&J Bar and Grill for a liverwurst sandwich if anybody wants to join me. Thank you.
Are you putting onions on that?
We can do onions.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Representative Cabell. Thank you to the panelists. This has been most informative to us. These are complicated issues. These are extremely important issues. And this hearing is probably going to blossom into about 20 other hearings. And my staff is getting nervous as we go. But I just, from a general standpoint, it's very frustrating as a representative from a district that is energy-centric, that does have a lot to lose with poor energy policy, to see us keep going down this path where we are paying more as consumers, we're paying more as ratepayers, all of us, whether it's residential consumers or industrial consumers, and we're getting a worse product. We're not just getting a worse product, we're getting a less reliable product. It's a very frustrating to hear this just firsthand, and it's something that just does not seem to make a whole lot of common sense. And you've been talking a lot about that today, Mr. Bear. And step one is, in my estimation, now I'm saying this, and I think it was said here today, but I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. Step one is getting out of this energy tax. This energy tax that the last administration got us into, that the current administration is teetering on. We need to get out of RGGI. We cannot have that as our energy policy going forward. That level of energy tax, again, is going down that same path of making things worse for reliability and making things worse for consumers as far as prices go, making jobs obviously leave the Commonwealth as well. None of it makes sense. We got to stop that. And we got to keep developing these issues, because we need to get us as representatives educated, because this is not just about conceptual energy, environmental policy. This is about jobs. This is about kitchen table issues. It's about people on fixed incomes paying for their electricity bills. It's about manufacturing. Second largest cost in manufacturing is energy costs. Sometimes the top cost is energy costs. And if our numbers are going up as far as how much it costs us to generate energy, then we're going to have less manufacturing here as well. And it's going to keep going to places like Ohio, or worse, like China and Vietnam, and it's going to continually hurt our environment as we go forward. So I really appreciate you putting this on, representatives. You guys did a fantastic job. Our next hearing is this Friday. It's a week from today, June 23rd. We'll meet in Homer City. And we talked a lot about Homer City. We're meeting in Homer City to further discuss energy policy at a hearing hosted by the good Representative Jim Struzzi. Until then, this meeting's adjourned.